this all over. Panel number 2, we are thrilled with entitled Funding Our Future. We have 3 leaders in our region and beyond who are with us today. John Bogley from Interlochen, Kristin Hettich from Rotary Charities of Traverse City, and Hettich Jones from the Petoskey Area Community Foundation. John, I'm going to introduce briefly and then turn everything over because he is going to wear 2 hats. He will be facilitating and also be a panelist. And they have a great conversation planned, and we want to make it as interactive as possible. So start writing down your questions, you got some sticky notes, and be ready to ask. Welcoming John Bogley, who's the Vice President for Philanthropy here at Interlochen Center for the Arts. John came to Interlochen from Walla Walla, Washington, where he led development for Whitman College. And we are thrilled that he has come back to the Mitten and he is leading the efforts here in Northern Michigan. And on that note, John?
Thanks so much, Mary. Good morning, everyone. I am a Traverse City native, so it's really nice to be home, and it's a thrill to welcome each of you to Interlochen's campus, a place that I dreamed about being a part of for many years before I finally got the job. So it's great of you to come and talk a little bit about arts and culture in Northwest Michigan. So as Mary has said, we're going to talk about future fundraising futures, trends, and strategies. We have 2 distinguished panelists plus me. So we have 2 great practitioners in the business, and I will introduce them. We intend to share some experiences and highlight fundraising trends and strategies that can unlock even greater success, we hope, for each of our organizations. First, Kristin, to my left, is the Director of Community Development at Rotary Charities of Traverse City. Kristin worked for several years in the nonprofit sector in Chicago, doing fundraising and program management. She's worked on mine remediation and water quality issues, and in Honduras as a Peace Corps volunteer. Prior to her role at Rotary Charities, Kristin was a program officer at the Alphawood Foundation in Chicago, which focused on a broad range of issues: arts education, health, housing, the environment, domestic violence, and Maya archaeology. David DJ Jones, to my right, is the Executive Director of the Petoskey Harbor Springs Community Foundation. He's been with the foundation since 2000 and became Executive Director in 2009, so more than 2 decades worth of work in the important mission of that foundation to improve the quality of life for the citizens of Emmett County. He earned his bachelor's degree from the University of South Carolina and an MBA through an innovative educational partnership between Lawrence Technological University and then the University Center at North Central Michigan College there at Petoskey. That is just a fantastic collaboration, efficiency in education. The foundation and DJ do the important work of meshing the aspirations of donors with their mission of building a community. It's impressive work. So as we all read about philanthropy today, and especially at the national level, most of the data is dated. You know, have you looked at the Giving USA survey that talks about 2019, maybe 2020? Yeah, okay, well, how relevant does that feel? Or how about the grant makers in the arts newsletters? It's great national level data, but we're here together in this corner of Northern Michigan, and we can talk about trends that are very contemporary. So the best information comes from those of us gathered here today. And it's our hope that we can ask you to provide us some of your questions about trends and strategies before we make our talk, and then we'll come back to those questions if we haven't addressed them in the formal remarks that the 3 of us have prepared. So, key issues. Raise your hand if you've heard any of these lately. The pandemic is a definitional pivotal moment for philanthropy. Raise them. Yeah, okay, there's a trope. How about this one? There's an unprecedented rate of change in philanthropy today. I don't want to offend anybody who raised money in the 80s. I'm sure they thought things would change pretty fast. And it's time to transition to the new normal. Yeah, good. Then there's the discussion of the impact of inflation, market instability, undermining the philanthropic environment. Anybody heard that one? See the stock market on Thursday, Friday? All right, to all of that, I suggest we say a collective, okay, but I've got a mission to deliver on and a budget to balance. So our fundraising work is still fundamentally and unchangeably about connecting donors' aspirations to our missions. This is, at its best, about human interaction and listening well enough to find the fit between what donors want to do and what we have to offer. The gifts will follow. So with that framework, let's focus our conversation on building on the thriving arts and cultural environment of Northern Michigan with all of its challenges and opportunities. So, I'm gonna give you a sense of what DJ and Kristin are gonna share and what I'll say, and then I wanna hear your questions so that we can try and address them as we go, and then leave time for general questions at the end. DJ will start with a discussion of strategic philanthropy, helping donors make good, purposeful choices about their philanthropic interests. He'll then turn to the emergence of donor advised funds as a force in philanthropy and what that means for us, and conclude with the discussion of a delicate balance between the need for operational supported organizations and the trend of increased interest in donor-directed philanthropy, restricted funds. Kristin's going to talk about the philanthropic environment from a funder's perspective. Rotary Charities is such an important organization to this region. She's going to talk about it both from Rotary Charities perspective and certainly from her work in Chicago. Kristin's also going to turn to macroeconomic analysis that we attest at the end about the potential impact of sustained inflation, market setback, economic slowdown, and recession. We'll be done with that in just a couple of minutes, so that'll be fine. And then she's going to talk a little bit about building our networks and how, in fact, local organizations, regional organizations like this can help all of us be better practitioners as we share information. I'll share some thoughts about lessons learned and experiences had in the pandemic era in fundraising and how meeting fundraising goals is changing, driven by trends in philanthropy and often our own success and actions, that is the professionalization of our work. So let me turn it over to you with those issues coming forth from my two distinguished panel members here. What would you most like to get out of the next 40 or 45 minutes as we talk about fundraising trends? Yes, in the back of the room.
I'm wondering on donor advised funds, is there a push for people to start spending them down?
There is some congressional conversation on that. Thank you. That's a good question.
John, if you repeat the question for our folks.
Thank you, Ian. So the question was, we'd like to hear whether there's any movement in the need for people to spend down their DAFs more quickly. I assume you don't mean more slowly, I'm just guessing. Other questions that you'd like us to take on? Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to hear how these things are playing out specifically in the arts, given that I feel like there's more funding available for the environment and conservation and food and farming, and the slice of the pie for the arts is really tiny. So how does that play out given our current wild situation?
It's a great question. The question is about are the arts suffering in the hands of STEM, the environment, housing, food stability, that sort of thing. Thank you. Another question.
So as our market, the market ages here, and obviously Interlochen, we're at a place where there's a lot of young people, but I work for the Symphony, and prior to that I worked for Father Fred Foundation, and many of our donors are even older than I am. So, I have my own answers, but I'd like to talk about how we get the 40-somethings or even the 30-somethings to be members of the symphony or, your organizations, and that is something I think that's really important for all of us.
So there is the age-old question about how do we make sure the next generation appreciates the arts as much as we do and those who came before us. Thank you.
Particularly looking at how within the pandemic over the last 3 years, the largest percentage of new businesses are created by traditionally marginalized populations. Looking at how that interplays within philanthropy, I'd be curious to learn about what is being changed in the accessibility to funds and this type of support that allows access to these populations that historically have been on the fringes and are exploring non-traditional, more disruptive endeavors.
It's a great question, and what the question that we need to take on revolves around this. There are new communities, voices that haven't been heard historically in the arts, and how can we make sure that there's adequate funding flowing to those organizations in an industry that hasn't been as diverse or as inclusive as it could be. Is that about right? Thank you.
Well, that's a good gentleman here. Oh, you had a question, I think, sir, didn't you? Okay.
It's a good thing I work.
Not to pick on you, but you raised your hand a minute ago, so I hope it's good.
I thought I learned in elementary school just to.
So I spotted you, sorry.
Yeah, Hettich. For a small, really small, rural organization that's in a fundraising campaign, are there affordable tools that will help identify people in the area who have resources? Financial resources.
So the question is, where are the donors who I might pay attention to, who can help a small arts organization grow its base of supporters and its ability to deliver on this mission? Okay, great. Thank you. It's great.
My question, and it really pertains to Kristin, you're of course with the Rotary Charities and David with the Community Foundation. Allison earlier hit on the importance of partnerships and getting involved in your local economic development. Obviously, placement is a big thing right now. There are a lot of federal grants out there, just money's flowing, it's short term. But, what are your agencies? I know what our agencies are doing in Cadillac, but boy, they're working with the members of the chamber, the leadership of the chamber, and a number of other things, sitting in on meetings with Michigan Economic Development Corp and so forth, and just the economic development aspect, if you're looking at future funding, are your communities showing in your master plan how they're gonna include arts and culture in your recreation plan? I mean, these are the economic development things that I think Allison may have been hitting on.
The question has to do with how can we, as we build stronger communities, and particularly from a funder's perspective, intersect that work with the money that's available from the state and federal government on a short-term basis to keep the arts well supported in that environment. I think that's going to make it necessary to remove the macroeconomic analysis from your presentation. We'll see. Anyway, that's a really good list of questions, and I know that DJ, Kristin, and I will think about those as we go, and if we leave out anything that you hope we would cover when we get to the other side, we'll hope to circle back to your question. So let me, with that, turn it over to DJ from Petoskey Harbor Springs Community Foundation.
Thank you, John, well done. Thank you all for the great questions ahead of time. I think when First of all, John and Chris and I go, way back. I think it's been at least 3 or 4 days. We met last week, and put this together, and we wanted, my goal here, today with you all, this is your summit, is you walk out here, having learned something, it's a conversation, so just to be interactive, so appreciate, the questions up front, we'll try to hit on all of most of them, so, as John said, there's 2 topics I want to try and cover in a short time, one of them, first one will be the donor rights community foundation. We're in a nice position, I think, to be able to work with a lot of really philanthropic individuals and families. And they come to us many times to create these what's called donor advice fund. I don't have time to get into the real nitty gritty or ABCs of donor advice fund. I'm going to assume you know a little bit about them, but you might know that Fidelity is the largest holder of donor advice funds. I can go on for hours about Fidelity and Schwab donor advice funds. Fidelity is the largest charity in this country thanks to the donor advice funds. Anyway, at community foundations, we have, I think, the benefit of a local connection with our donors and donor advice funds where they can use us as their philanthropic advisors to advise them on what the needs are in the community. So, but the donor advice funds are probably, if I can appreciate it for the nonprofit sector out there, arts, education, environment, they're a bit of a mystery. Maybe, and some people view them as maybe a tough nut to crack, so to speak, but from our perspective, we love them obviously, and we love having conversations with these folks about their philanthropy. And I tell people that giving away money is easy, giving away money effectively is not. These folks, not all donor advice funds, by the way, are high net worth individuals, don't have to be a philanthropist. So, but sitting down with them and having these kind of deep conversations, whether it's a mom and pop or a mom and pop and kids, what are your goals, what are your values for your family, and how do you want to support your community? Those are great conversations to have, privilege to have them with folks. So, but this is a growing field. Our donor advice funds for the last 10 years have just kind of exploded. I don't have to promote them at all. I literally have people calling saying, "Hey, I want to create a donor advice fund." Don't do any promotion of it at all. So, but you'll see the news stories about donor advice funds. There's some of these questions about spending from donor advice funds. They're different in each shop. So in our shop, most of our donor advice funds, with the exception of 2 or 3 that are really large, most of them are not endowed. So that means they can spend down, pretty much down to zero out of the donor advice funds if they want. We ask them to keep a little minimum in there, about 5,000, but above that they can grant away. And then if you get larger community foundations, larger donor advice funds, then some of them are endowed, meaning they're permanent. And they're only spending maybe 5 or 4% on their endowment to do grant. But ours are not endowed mostly because we want the money out the door as much as possible. So that spending rate doesn't really come into effect. We encourage our donor advice funds to grant out as frequently as they want to and they can. So I will say, looking at a snapshot of our donor advice fund grant making over the last few years, you may be happy to know that about 10% of the grants from our donor advice funds go to arts and culture. That chunk when we're doing about, our donor advice funds do about $2.5 million a year in grant making out of our door. Which is a staggering figure for me, even for me. We cover Henry County and that's just our donor advice funds, $2.5 million. They did and drive the bus for our grant making, but anyway, they do a good job of getting money out to the local community, and we do our best to help them be more strategic about it and have those conversations. Where do you want to see your legacy? And I don't know that to the point of the question about the arts not maybe receiving funding. I meet a lot of folks that love the arts, and so. You probably think that more than 10% of the pie from donor advice funds. I can appreciate that. But I think that's not a not a bad slice of pie, and consider, all the competitions out there, to receive grant funding, so, and I will acknowledge that, not all donor-advised funds are as, strategic as we might like, some of them are still kind of, a little bit, like you all, they get about 50 letters and envelopes in the mail in November. And they do a little bit of the peanut butter spreading amongst a lot of our organizations. And then they come to say, well, I just didn't realize that funded that many groups with my $25 gifts. And we say, well, that's fine, if that's what you want. If that's what you really want to do, or we can kind of pull back and say, what are your interests? Can we help you focus on what really matters to you? So, and not that any grant size isn't a good grant, but maybe you can do something besides the $25 gift, the side of our grant. So anyway, that's how kind of donor-advised funds, we operate in our shop, try and work with them to be a little more strategic and philanthropic. I will say, I won't get into the public policy stuff, because that'll take all day, but I do try and keep on top of public policy and philanthropy. Donor-advised funds are, well, for us it is, and I hope you all talk to your policymakers as much as we do. They just don't get it. In DC, they don't understand philanthropy, they don't understand endowment, and they don't understand the value the nonprofit sector brings to the community. So anytime you get that narrative out there on your behalf, do that. So donor-advised funds out there are really seen as kind of that apple. A bunch of really rich people that just kind of park their money in a fund, get a tax deduction, and don't do anything. That's not the case. Sure, there probably are some that don't grant out as much as we would like, but they're not just maliciously sitting on money. It's not the way it works. So we have to educate our policymakers on the benefit of donor-advised funds. So spending is not, I don't think, a huge issue from donor-advised funds. I think they do a pretty good job on that front. Real quick, when we come back to some of the other questions, I want to talk, if I just want to talk second topic on the operating. I don't want to monopolize the talking here. Kristin's got some good things to cover about the macroeconomics. So, no pressure. If you keep the stock market in line with that, capacity building, right? And it's a sexy sidekick operating. It's essential. I think what I saw even pre-COVID in the grant making world was a trend to funders, especially community foundations, being willing, to fund operating, right? To making those operating grants. I think that was a good trend. You can argue there's some funders that maybe people all talk to that shut them down on that topic, but we've always had the philosophy that it's operating funding is essential. You can fund all the sexy programs you want, but those programs don't exist. The organization's a mess. So operating support is extremely important. And capacity building is semantics. Capacity building might be stuff like board governance, things like that. They're often important to nonprofits too. So I think those kind of funding is important. I think especially grant makers have a special niche to be able to provide that funding. I hope you all can go out and tell a great story to John and Jane Smith about let's support your programming. That should be easy to sell, right? Probably not so much on the operating side, so I hope the funders would have them on and provide some of the funding that isn't quite as easy to go out and raise dollars for. So then the pandemic hit, and then everything was operating for a while. Emergency fundraising to keep your operating going. We did funding for arts and culture even during the pandemic because you all are able to get any revenue from your shows. So as we come out of the pandemic, I'm hoping that we've all learned something about how important this kind of funding is for the sector as a whole, and certainly for the arts organizations. I would just echo what Trey, President Devin said at the outset about telling your narrative out there. You got a great story to tell. and just keep telling your narrative as far as building up your funding base. I'm gonna stop there because I don't want to ramble on any more than I already have and get some of the questions, but I don't have a question.
Thank you, DJ.
Thank you, and I haven't taken the macroeconomics course since my undergrad days, but you won't talk about how many decades ago that was, so you have nothing to worry about. So in terms of the funders perspective, so I will also preface this by saying I've been here 6 months, both in the Traverse City area and also my role at Rotary Charities. So I feel like I'm wearing multiple hats. I wear like the Rotary Charities hat that I'm still getting settled into. I wear the previous foundation hat that I was still at, and then also just my personal view on philanthropy, because as somebody who came from the nonprofit sector and then transitioned into philanthropy, and after almost 10 years of it, I will say my perspective of philanthropy shifted over that course of time. I will say, and not to harp on one of the pandemic tropes that John talked about earlier, but I do think there is hope in philanthropy of changing attitudes. You know, and I think that was brought on by the pandemic. It's just you have to be very patient in that. It's very slow moving. And I know when we talked, the three of us talked last week, DJ said, you know, you need one community foundation, you've got one community foundation. I have a colleague back in Chicago who said the same thing about foundations in general. You've got one foundation, you've got one foundation. We're all different. Community foundations are different from private foundations, which are different from charitable foundations. And we are all different, and I apologize for that. It makes your job very, very difficult, but it's the truth. And so I don't want to speak for every foundation, but I will say over the past 2 years, I have started to garner a little bit of hope in watching some of these trends shift and move. So I think you just need to be patient. I will also see some that's generational. There are family foundations to that younger generation coming in who are now getting on boards, and they're the ones starting to push for change. They're the ones wanting to kind of experiment with participatory grant making, and so again, you just kind of have to be patient with that younger generation coming in who acknowledges that you know, grants shouldn't always be viewed as gifts, but as you know, that foundation is sort of, you know, it's what they should be doing with their money. So there is hope. I will try to give you that ray of hope in terms of the funder's perspective. And we really are trying to address, you know, marginalized communities and, you know, general operations. I came from a foundation that's all we did was general operations. And I was like, yes. It was just amazing. At the same time, we did not do capital grants. We did not do capacity building, so when I got to Rotary Charities, I was like, yes. So, you know, again, every foundation is different with, you know, how they want to focus the grant making, but, you know, if you get all of that going at once, that would be fantastic. I'm a big proponent of general operations, but also understand we really do need to support capacity of organizations, and also sometimes some capital for them. So no macroeconomics, we're not getting into that, but I will say I was on an interesting webinar with, I think it was Council Michigan Foundation recently, just talking about the state of things. And of course it panic inducing because, you know, we talked about inflation, we talked about a potential recession, we talked about all the labor, you know, well then how do you retain labor if you can't pay them and cost of living and everything. And it was a little panic inducing. As a funder, it was panic inducing. But I also think it's a reality. And so it's a matter of finding some really creative ways to partner, to collaborate, you know, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Probably shouldn't say that in this room, but they even talked about the fact that you might see more mergers happening between nonprofits.
So again, it's the reality, we shouldn't panic about it, it's just a matter of how do we now adapt to it. So that is all the economics I will give you. But I will say, what is exciting about being in this room with you all is that you are here because you are part of this network. And I think that this is where you kind of have your strength is with each other. Again, coming from a foundation that funded advocacy, I'm a big proponent of advocacy, policy work. Not only do we have arts organizations that did it, but I mean, it was throughout various issue areas ranging from, health, environment. So that's the strength in this room is you do have to advocate to your legislators, you have to advocate to the community, the importance of the arts. It was very apparent during the pandemic, the importance of the arts. I know a lot of organizations that adapted their programming to online programming. And, it really allowed people to not feel so isolated. So, again, talking about telling your story, that's exactly what you have to do is tell your story. And I know a question specifically about how do you get that younger generation. Some of it, is relevance as well. Like, how do you relate to this younger generation? And I'm not saying classical music isn't relevant because I grew up with it. I love it. I went to the opera and the symphony as a child, and I was fortunate though to have parents who instilled that in me, and not everybody is in that position of privilege of having those opportunities. And so it really is about, how do you relate to the younger generation? And I know I shared with them, Silver and Lynette did a study in Massachusetts, which I know is not Michigan, but they did a study that resulted in, I think, 77% of the respondents said that they looked to the arts for connection and engagement, and 8% of the respondents said that they looked to the arts to address social issues. And so, again, I think this is something that's come out of the pandemic is how are the arts changing, and how do people engage in the arts differently now? It isn't just about going out on a Friday night or a Sunday matinee. It's about how do people want to engage in the arts, either as creators or as audience. So I rambled. I don't know if I answered any questions, but I'm happy to answer anything that you might have.
Thanks, Kristin. That's terrific. So I had a few comments, and I think I'll open with this one, and then I want to go back to a couple of other things. Questions that you all asked about. When the pandemic broke and the world changed, I don't know how much reading you do about this fundraising profession and not-for-profit profession, hopefully a lot, but all of the consultants said the same thing. Talk to your donors, find out how they're doing, tell them how you are doing and your organization is doing in a period of rapid change. And if you have the experience that certainly we have where I work here at Interlochen, those conversations open doors that we didn't even know existed. It went on to become conversations about increased flexibility for the use of gifts, maybe even endowment funds that were temporarily redirected to support operations. Interlochen operates at the intersection, as you may have heard Trey say, of education, the arts, and hospitality. Three industries hit really, really hard, and we faced significant questions at the moment when we realized we couldn't hold our summer camp, when we couldn't hold our concert series, and we were wondering whether students would still participate in our education in person. Well, we talked to everybody. And then we launched the emergency response fund that, probably all of you did as well. And then we thanked people for their flexibility, and then we thanked people for their additional gifts to the emergency response fund. And so if we call the pandemic a culture shift. I just want to point out that culture shift was actually a return to the basics of fundraising. What do? You talk to people about your mission and why it matters. What would happen if Interlochen didn't exist? And it's your philanthropy that's making it possible for us to be here. Thank you for your gift. Here's how it made an impact. We were able to launch an online camp program sort of out of thin air in 6 weeks and have thousands of students involved in it. Why? Because the mission matters, and your support made that happen. If this sounds like standard fundraising, it is. But I think what the pandemic taught me and my team, who I wish more of them were here, but they're working. Well, I told them to stay at their desks and they're fine. By the way, all of you who know Drew Buckholz who've been involved with this organization for years, he says hello. And I told him to stay at his desk and they're fine. But what we came back with was a renewed sense of how to talk about your mission and how to engage people in your mission, even if they couldn't be on campus, for the magic of what we do. So we, of course, went to online programming, virtual events. We were unrolling a new strategic plan at Interlochen called Vision 2028. And as the lead fundraiser, I had planned to put on a series of programs in ports of call around the nation to promote what Vision 2028 had to offer, why it mattered, why this was what was next for Interlochen. All those plans went out the window. And we did 10 events virtually. We did 4 more for Interlochen Public Radio. My friend Peter Bass in the front row did these recently for Interlochen Public Radio. And I have to say that the innovation that was forced on us was more productive than we could have done if we spread out and sent all the money traveling around the world telling our story. And we had literally hundreds of people attend sessions because they could out of the convenience of their home. So we innovated. And we learned and we engaged more people, we got more feedback, better feedback, and it changed how we approach future events as we emerge or not from this pandemic. We know we have no tool in our toolkit, which is the virtual event. So, everybody says, it's a world of transition and all that sort of thing. No, there's nothing except transition is permanent. It always is going on, so we just take advantage of it. We won't know that the world has changed until we look back at it and say, oh wow, that was a sea change. Or no, it's just part of a continual evolution, what's been coming for decades. So let's step back, having said those things. I do want to point out something DJ talked about with arts awards. Do the arts get short shrift in the philanthropic sector? I was reading the 2019 Giving USA statistics, and arts and culture attracts about 10% of the philanthropic dollars out there. That was the number you used for the community foundation. That's interesting. How do we earn a greater share, regardless of the type of organization? In particular, as we have new voices that need to be represented. Well, it comes down to telling your story well. Why does it matter that we exist? If we don't exist at Interlochen so that the faculty and the administrators all have jobs. No, it's because we believe that young people with arts training who learn how to think and rebound from setbacks, who learn how to perform, who learn how to work together collaboratively as part of an ensemble or a troupe or whatever, go out and make a difference in the world. And if we don't do that, nobody else is going to. So what's your story? This is a time to sharpen our pencils and think about how what your organization does makes the world a better place. That's our responsibility going forward. And I will say, I'm sorry, the gentleman who was sitting here who was saying, maybe I will not answer that question yet. I wanted to talk about accessibility for sort of DEIB issues. I want to come back to that, but I want to hold off for a moment. There was another question about accessing donors as a small organization that I think is really worth taking on. Some of us, including Interlochen, publish our donor list to thank our donors for their support. I'd make sure you pick those up and take a look at them, because you're going to know some of the people on the list, and the people who are involved in your organization who care about it most are going to know people on that list. And then your job is to provide individuals you know more information about why what you do is important.
I will honestly say in my previous job, I would encourage other organizations that I would meet with to just look at other organizations, annual reports and whatnot, to say, you know, you're a single organization, look at who's funding that, you know, I would actively do that.
The Grant Traverse Community Foundation list is a treasure trove. The Illinois Conservancy is a treasure trove. They're a great list. Interlochen's list, please don't look. It's published both in our annual report of gifts and in our programs at events every summer. Why? Because it's a way of saying thank you. The Symphony does a great job. The TSO does a great job publishing their list of donors. But what matters most there is finding people who already care about their mission. One of the missed opportunities I think I was guilty of missing early on, and I try really hard not to miss it anymore, is when people come out to an event. What are you doing to make sure you know that they were there and that you follow up with them to say thanks for being there? You know, the old, guest registration, email, phone number, that's old school, but it is gold. Who makes gifts to your organization? The people who engage with it. So Peter Payette at IPR has more than a dozen public performances coming up this summer by a couple of ensembles, just terrific. I encourage you to attend any one of them. But at those events, we're going to be paying attention to who's there. These are IPR people who care about the arts. You should come. And you should be there to network with people who care about arts and culture. Let's go there. Yeah, thanks.
Well, it's kind of a follow-up what you just said, but you can't hear me?
Yes, the folks at home won't be able to get you.
Sorry, copy it.
Sorry.
Who's talking?
Okay, so it's a follow-up question. This is a question for DJ and Kristin. Can you explain for the newbies in the room, which I'm not, but I think it's important for people to understand. Can you explain the process of connecting an arts organization to a foundation's process of donor advised funds? For example, when I go to a website and I see all these donor advised funds, and then I go to the grant application process, and there's maybe 3 or 4 of those funds that are available. Can you explain the process of how the organization can connect with the foundation staff and maybe get to know what would be a suggestion of connecting the 2 organizations? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to touch on as far as topic too. My smart app response is, you know what a phone is. So pick up the phone and call it foundation. But I do think it goes to this point of finding donors. John said what I was going to say was, we published, people ask me how to get to our donor advice funds. Look at our annual report. They're in there. So, but the step farther that you're going is, how do I actually make that connection? Rather than just learning who they are, how do I get their dollars, right? So, and again, you see one community foundation, you see one community foundation. Most community foundations, I'm safe to say, and it's becoming more of a popular trend, they are involving their donor advice funds in their grant cycles, right? We have 2 cycles a year, spring and fall. When we get those proposals in the door, we get about 40 grant applications each cycle. Our staff put summaries together of each one of those proposals. We call it Giving Together Guide. Donor advice funds love it. We send it to them, so here, this is what we're looking at. Let's come in for a grant application. You all are welcome to recommend grants to these projects, or you're welcome to ignore them, or you're welcome to tell us you don't want to get this guy. But we involve them in our grant cycles as if nothing else is educational piece they can learn what's going on in the community. Again, it's totally optional for them. But that is really the best way you're going to get in front of that audience through a community foundation is through a grant cycle. You may find a community foundation that says, oh yeah, we contact our donor advisors all the time about opportunities. We'll let some donor advisors know if something comes up that we think is of interest to theirs. But we're not gonna constantly play this game with being a gatekeeper, you contact me, and I'll contact them, it's just, there's not enough time in the day to play that kind of role, but, there are times when something comes up and say, hey, this actually might be of interest to this family, let's talk about it. More or less, more often than not, you're gonna get in front of them, by calling the foundation saying, what is your grant process? Can I submit a grant application? And I suspect you have some, they would say, yeah, we put our donor advised funds in our grant cycles. Yeah.
Great question. That's great. Kristin, you want to take that as well?
Sure, I mean, we don't have donor advised funds, so if you just wanna meet with us, we are very open on our website with our emails, and so that is honestly the best way. Just send us an email, say, hey, can I talk to you about your process? Can I talk to you about this project we have? At my previous foundation, we were a by invitation only foundation, and I have no secret sauce, to tell you how to break that code. Other than we did at least have an LOI process, so an organization could fill out that, online, but there are some foundations that don't even have that, and I don't know what to tell you. It is just a matter of the 6 degrees of separation of knowing somebody in those cases, and so that is also why it's important to continually be networking at these events, at other, arts events around town, because you never know who you're going to meet, so it really is a matter of just kind of keeping up with that, but, yeah.
So as Kristin said, just then earlier, there's various types of foundations out there, and there are some private foundations, like she said, there was kind of don't bother us, we know we want fun, don't come out. They follow the golden rule. Does everyone know what the golden rule is? Those that go make the rules. So, they're gonna fund what they want to fund, they're not gonna be able to push them, that's just a thing that reality. But, other foundations are out there, you can find them through directories and online searches. The Council Mission Foundation, CNF, is a great resource if you're looking for foundation funders in the state. Council on Foundations nationally is a good resource for foundations funding, but most of them are want to hear from you and learn, but there are some just they're going to do their own thing, don't worry about it.
The impact of knowing people is how our donor advised funds come to us. We talk to individual donors, and it turns out they have a fidelity fund. So the process tends to run from the donor back to a Fidelity or a Vanguard or whichever, along the way as well. So there was a really interesting question about what do we do with the flow of state and federal tax dollars that are available, and how can agencies collaborate? Here we sit in this room together, talking about funding the arts. A lot of interesting work is going on right now, Charities Connect and Rotary Charities and a number of others have joined together to sort of collate the interests of community organizations, including, I'm sure, many of you, to ask, what are your funding priorities? What do you want to do? How can we think about these problems together to try and maximize this one-time sort of windfall of funds that are available? I think taking advantage of being involved in groups like that really matters. I do think it's imperative that we follow up as individual groups. I mean, Interlochen submitted its ideas, but our job is to stay in touch with a group of people who are collating those discussions and make sure that our voice continues to be represented at the table. And if you submitted to that, I would encourage you to do that as well, because there are really big decisions that you want to be a part of. And by being a part of the discussion prior to any decision making, it advances your organization and makes sure more people know your mission and why it matters. And regardless of whether you wind up as part of the priorities that will be submitted from any group that you sort of get together with or not, you always have the opportunity to go straight to your elected representatives who are there to work with constituents, and we're that. And we need to stand up for the arts. This is a shoe leather phone call conversation business, and you want to be a part of it, not wait for somebody to remember how important what we do is. So I wanted to take that on, that the collaborative work. Do you want to speak to that at all from the Rotary Charities leadership position, or you think we've covered that?
I think you've covered it. I don't sit at that table, but I mean, it was an interesting collaboration. Again, as a foundation that promotes collaboration and partnerships, it's kind of a nice representation of us doing that as well in this case. So, and I honestly don't know where we stand in terms of reviewing the submissions, so.
People came together is the point, and coming together in situations like this and other times is really important to advocate for our arts organizations. Yeah, go ahead.
We're running out of time, I know, in Hampton County, so we're talking about the American Relief Plan dollars, the ARPA dollars, and others, and some of this morning, changes my mind. Anyway, last year I had the pleasure of presenting to the Michigan Association of Counties, county administrators, a colleague of mine in Charlevoix, giving this, called pitch, about these dollars coming into the coffers, how they can partner with community foundations to get these dollars out of the community, which is the whole intent. And every county is different too. So I think Grant Travers has done a great job here in the community of collaborating on it. I'll just say Hampton County, there's no Hampton County commissioners in the room, right? They're trying, more so than I thought they would. They did a survey just recently, community-wide survey to try and gain knowledge. Haven't heard how that went. Wasn't my idea of the best survey, but at least it did. And so they're talking now about how to get these dollars out in the community. How it's going to rise up to arts and education groups, it's anybody's guess, and it's probably, maybe to John's point, it's up to you a little bit, get on the phone or find out how those dollars might get in your hands.
Wonderful. So we are at 11:15, which is the advertised transition time to the next panel. So I want to thank Kristin and DJ for their great remarks and for their thoughtfulness about trends and strategies and fundraising. I want to remind everyone that this afternoon there's a fundraiser sort of roundtable. And if you're interested in talking further about fundraising, there are a couple of real sharpies from my staff, Emily Collar and Tamara Tinhoff, who will sit and talk with anyone about some of the really important nuts and bolts issues that we face as fundraisers. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you. And thank you for that.